Hey everyone, welcome to our podcast, Would You Stay Tuned? In this podcast, the premise is pretty simple. We, not as a group, we, on our own time, watch a pilot episode of a show, and we decide based on that pilot alone if we would continue to stay tuned and watch the rest of the show based on that pilot.
Or maybe not the rest of the show, at least continuing the show.
Maybe even continue a couple episodes.
Do you feel like watching the next episode,
Is it intriguing enough to go on?
Did the pilot serve the role of a good pilot, which is to hook you, get you going, get you interested, introduce the characters, the storyline, whatever it may be, and keep you pressing next?
Yeah.
To the next episode.
Because a pilot can do that. Like it could be like Blacklist, right? Where it was a pretty good pilot, so you wanted to keep watching, and then 4 seasons in, you're like, wow, please stop the show.
Except we watched all 10 seasons.
Yeah, we tortured ourselves for 6 more seasons.
For years we were watching that show.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, literally. It's actually, the Blacklist is actually the only show I've ever watched the most seasons of, which is 10 seasons. I've never watched 10 seasons of anything in my entire life.
I haven't watched
the Blacklist.
Even one episode of that show. I can't. It's on my blacklist.
Got him.
We'll add that one to the We'll add that to the Would You Stay Tuned list.
Nope, it's on the list.
It's on the list. It's on the Blacklist. So, with that being said, I'm joined by 2 other wonderful people named
I don't know if I would say that.
And Dan, and my name is Sarah, and we actually have a separate podcast. You may recognize our voices from another podcast we do called Newbie Star Trek. And in that podcast, we are newbies. I am newbies. Dan is newbies. Everyone's on a different level of newbiness to Star Trek. I'm completely new to Star Trek. And right now we're going through Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. So you can definitely check us out there if you're interested in that. But this podcast is not about Star Trek.
What is it about?
This podcast is about...
What's this episode about?
Okay. Well, I did tell you what this podcast is about.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to tell you what this episode is about. This episode is about a show called Interview with the Vampire. The pilot episode of Interview with the Vampire. And I'm talking about the show that came out a couple years ago. God, was it years ago at this point?
I mean, it's a healthy 71 minutes, by the way.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah. Well, it's AMC. AMC can just make it whatever.
Oh, wait a minute.
Want,
I'm sorry. It feels extra long because the video file that I happen to be watching did include like an inside the episode preview at the end, and a little bit of
just for anyone who starts Interview with the Vampire, they do come with those at the end. There's no need to watch those. Those are terrible. Like all of those. Yeah,
they're really bad recaps. I've watched a couple of them, and it's literally
I sat around for this one just to see what it would be, and
like you would think it would be like, now let's go behind the scenes to see how Interview with the Vampire was created, but it's literally just a producer just recapping the events of the episode, and you're like, what the hell is this? This is a complete waste of time. This is something you would do to promote the episode, not to put at the end when someone who is interested in how the episode was made would be watching. Like, it makes no sense.
Or even some analysis from a producer's point of view. They don't really do that. I feel like they just analysis. Kind of recap what happens.
It's just a superficial recap of what happened.
I mean, who knows what the guy was told during the interview about what it would be used for, but...
See, my suspicion is that it was like an EPK team who just went in and was like, well, we weren't given a directive, so just tell us about the episodes in order. And then later the producer's like, guys, this was supposed to be like a recap thing. I was like, oh, well, you didn't tell us that. So that seems like, and they already paid them for it. So it's like, let's just make this really quickly and put it up.
Yeah. Anyway, we're talking about shit that we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about this recap.
But just for someone who's going to watch it, don't watch those. They're not worth your time.
Before we dive in, there's a couple things I want to say up front about the scope of this discussion.
Okay.
For the sake... Okay, let me back it up a little bit. I'm giving some context here.
Right.
So I am a lifelong Anne Rice reader, fan, enjoyer of all of her properties. I'm also I very much enjoy her son, Christopher Rice. Very much a fan of his books. I have been reading and enjoying Anne Rice since I was a young teenager. It was one of the first books. Interview with the Vampire was one of the first novels I ever read in my life. And from that moment on, I was completely hooked. And I have been reading Anne Rice and Christopher Rice ever since. I've enjoyed, I've now in this kind of more recently, I read the Mummy series, the Ramses series, which I'm very much enjoying.
I have a question. When was Interview with the Vampire, the original novel, released or originally published?
Oh, it was in the 90s. Let me double check
because I remember a movie coming out in the 90s with Tom Cruise in it.
Oh yes,
but
yes.
I'm talking about the novel.
So it was, oh God, sorry. I'm sorry. It wasn't in the 90s. Oh my God. It was in 1976.
I was like, that sounds very wrong.
Oh my God. Sorry. No, that you can cut that out. That was not right.
No, it's all staying in.
I think what my mind went to was the movie. The movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt was released in 1994. And that was a huge deal. I was too young.
Did you watch the movie before you read the book? Or did you read the book first?
I actually read the book first, I believe.
Interesting.
Because
I think that's uncommon for our generation.
Yeah, it might be. When I was a teenager around that age, I was really into vampires, witches, tarot cards.
What do you mean that age?
Stuff.
You still are.
Yeah, I still am very much into
and you've
those
accumulated
things.
Crystals along the way.
I have crystals. I'm very much an enjoyer of all of these things still.
It's funny because she tells me like, I like looking at them, but I like to imagine that quietly in the dark, she like does things with them.
Doing things.
So my bad. The book Interview with the Vampire was released in 1976. And then it was adapted. It's honestly one of the best-selling novels of all time. I think there was a point in time where I remember when I was young, when you go over to like family members' houses or like friends' houses, and you, as a child, you kind of are curious about their house and you kind of peruse through their things sometimes. Like, I would go check out people's libraries, right? And while they still had them, I don't even know if people have the books in their house anymore. But back in the 90s, when I was a child, I would take a look I was very into reading. I would take a look at people's book collections, and more often than not, I would say 99% of the time, people's book collections always had Interview with the Vampire or an Anne Rice novel. It was like a household staple.
Well, it became like a modern classic. I mean, although originally when it came out, it was actually came out to pretty mixed to negative reviews and was a slow burn. It took a while for the fans to become advocates for the books.
It took a while for Anne Rice to get this published.
Yeah. Well, there was the usual, oh, you're a woman.
Okay, I have a burning question on my mind then. Especially with someone who has read the books, like, first and foremost here.
Which only Sarah has. I'm only familiar with the visual media.
How accurate of an adaptation is the story of like this pilot, like compared to the book?
So I can answer that. Yeah. Well, Sarah answer that, because that's the part I found fascinating about this show.
So that brings me. Thank you, Dan, for asking that question, because that brings me to my next point, which is, although I am a beloved person of the Anne Rice property series of Interview with the Vampire and all of Mayfair Witches, Talamasca Vampire, all of them, Mummy series, Ramses, I'm going to limit my comparisons to the book as much as possible through this discussion, because I truly believe that these are separate entities. They're kind of apples and oranges.
I disagree dramatically.
I do not believe, for the scope of this podcast, of like the would you stay tuned aspect of it, I'm trying to think of this show independently of the novels, because while it is the source material, and the characters are very much inspired, and the storylines and everything like that. It's different. It's a different take.
I don't know how you can separate it though. The show explicitly.
Well, I'm having a hard time separating, but for the sake of this discussion, I don't want it to just be a complete well, in the show it's this, but in the book it's this. I don't want to go down that road because we would be here all day if we did that.
But that's not what I'm saying. The show explicitly says, hey, the events of Interview with the Vampire did happen in the 70s. However, Louis told him lies. And they were all lies.
It's a departure. That's not, it uses it as the books are used as a pushing off point for this show.
Well, this is technically a sequel. That's what I'm saying. This is technically not a direct adaptation of Interview with the Vampire. This is a sequel to Interview with the Vampire.
That was one of my biggest questions about this, because it was clear that they were recontextualizing it for then modern day. They explicitly mention a pandemic.
Yes.
And it's so with that much of a modern context, very much at the forefront of everything, I was clearly this isn't how the original thing went.
No, there was no pandemic.
I would love to know what Daniel Malloy's involvement was in the original version of the story, because it clearly wasn't this. And that's why I was already starting to be how accurate is this version compare, how faithful is this version to previous versions or the source material?
So I think the show, it is referencing the novel particularly, but I think the show is cognizant of the idea that in the public consciousness, the most popular interpretation of Interview with the Vampire is the 1994 movie. And it sort of plays with that, all of the visuals of the way the tapes worked at the beginning, and even the dialogue being used on the tapes, it's all from the movie.
Okay, so, and for the listeners at home, I'll just give context that I have, as of this recording, only seen this one pilot of Interview with the Vampire, and I haven't seen the movie from before. Okay. I haven't read any books. I have zero exposure prior to this. So I'm coming here so fresh that I feel like I might be asking the questions that aren't interesting. So
well, I thought that would be an interesting point though, because for me, I am tangentially aware of Anne Rice's works and what they are, and I'd only seen. Well, I was aware in general before, and it's hard to ignore the through osmosis. And then also that the only thing I had seen before was the movie, 1994 movie,
which Anne Rice. You're bringing me to my next point here, which is Anne Rice was involved in the 1994 movie. Anne Rice has since passed away as of this recording. She passed away on December 11th, 2021, unfortunately, at the age of 80. For me, it was really sad. I mean, she was very, very active online with her readers and supporters up until pretty close to her death. She would post daily. She was very involved and very much still writing up until her death. So definitely a sorely missed presence in the literary world. But unlike the 1994 movie and their involvement, Anne Rice and her son, Christopher Rice, other than selling the rights to AMC and being listed as executive producers for obviously the source material and the characters in the world and everything like that, the Anne Rice estate has no, and I mean no, involvement in the AMC show. There was talks of them being involved initially, but creative differences drove them to not be involved anymore. And there's not a lot of details around what the fallout was, because her son, Christopher Rice, obviously, I'm sure he signed a lot of NDAs and probably a lot of paperwork, because when he's asked about it, he has no comment, or he says, you can direct your questions to AMC. And he says the same thing every single time. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't comment on the show. It's as if it doesn't exist in his world. And I'm sure that's because he's probably signed a lot of paperwork in order to be silenced about that. Because of course, if Anne Rice's son came out and said, I hate this, I don't want this, this is not what I wanted, it would obviously be a huge, huge contradiction, and people who are fans would probably not I mean, I would probably not support it if Christopher Rice told me, please don't watch this, I don't support this. I mean, my loyalty and allegiance is definitely to the Rice family. And if he has concerns, I would definitely want to hear him out. But seems like he's not allowed to talk about it. With that being said, though,
I don't know if I agree with that point of view, to be honest, to be so fanatical to a certain type of authorial work that you are, if the author tells you to not enjoy an adaptation of it, you will disregard it. I feel like that's a little dogmatic.
Let me revise what I'm saying. I would want to hear him out. I would want to hear the arguments and I guess decide for myself if I would want to support the work or not. I wouldn't say that I would like totally exit out of my brain, but I would definitely be interested in what the creator of the material has to say about how it's being handled, for sure. So that was a couple things. So with that being said, I'm going to try to resist doing the whole comparison thing. Like, this isn't like this isn't like that. But I will point out a couple things where, like, in this show,
then maybe I want to establish something for my own understanding. Then is it the premise of the show that it is very much a retelling of the original, like the do-over that they mention here is like this version. We're just going to go through the whole story over again. But
to some extent, it's almost a metafiction. So it's sort of an admitting that we are remaking the story, because there's large details of the original standing. Like, first of all, Louis was not black. Louis was it was just two white guys. That's what I was
going to get to. It's there's a heavy presence of.
Are you telling me this is one of those woke shows?
And
there's also, I mean, that being said, I mean, I'll get it out of the way. I really love the show. I love the creative freedoms they've taken. I think it's gone in an awesome direction, and that the departure from the source material has been excellent, in my opinion. And I'm saying that as a Anne Rice fan, Christopher Rice fan. Like, I don't know what happened behind the scenes in terms of creative differences, but I very much agree with the creative direction this show has gone in. So I'll get that out of the way.
I mean, I have to. My theory with the disagreement is based on the idea that Anne Rice has always been hyper protective of her work, to the point where it's almost, in my mind, it's too much, in my opinion. Like, for example, she will prosecute people who makes fanfics of Interview with the Vampire.
I agree with that. Like, I
completely disagree. I dramatically disagree. I think all that does
You're talking about the fan fiction where people go ahead, that site where people go ahead and write their own.
Yeah, people do that with things they love all the time, and it's a way of allowing people to...
Like, fan fiction has existed since,
Yeah, for a really long time. I remember going on that site and
it is a legitimate form of written work. Many famous authors came out of fan fiction.
But there's a lot of authors that opt out of it, that do not want their work to be...
But Anne Rice, they're rare, and very few prosecuted to the degree Anne Rice did, with the fervor that she did, and implored her fan base to never do it, and was angry about it. And I just think that's a little too far, in my opinion, because it's almost hostile to a certain part of your fan base that really wants to enjoy your material a certain way. And I think that's probably where the disagreement came with the show, because they wanted to make huge changes. Like, Louis was originally a white guy who owned a plantation. He wasn't a black guy trying to survive in New Orleans with his family's created income.
Right. He was not, and there was no, although Louis did have a family in the book, there's no involvement in terms of, like, the brother in the show. There's
brother's
brother
already
Paul,
dead in the book. Yeah.
His sister, all this stuff. Like, that's not.
So in the book, they didn't like wind him up the way this pilot did.
No,
like, they didn't like take him, like tear him down to his lowest level.
This is all I know for sure is the movie version. At least in the movie version, it's honestly really boring until he becomes a vampire, in my opinion. Like, in the movie version, it's sort of like, okay,
that's so interesting, because for me, it's like, as soon as the vampire stuff like actually took hold, I was like, oh man.
Well,
that's why I want to avoid like steering the conversation into too much of a comparison, because it's They're not.
But the show wants you to. The show literally asks you to.
I actually disagree with you. I don't. I think it's a jumping off point, right?
I think it's totally valid fodder for conversation about the show.
I think it's valid. I just don't want the conversation to all be surrounded. I want to talk about the show in the context of this wonderful, brilliant show, not necessarily comparing it to its past properties, which...
Well, the thing about it, though, is I've been trying desperately to just confirm its relation to the past work.
It's a jumping off point. It's a jump. There are some, its relations to the past are... The character structures are there. I can tell you right now, like...
I'm sorry. I just imagined Daniel Malloy going to Louis and say, like, the first version of the interview was all wrong. You weren't white.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's been some modern day liberties, but overall, like, the character structures are there. Some of the storylines are there. Obviously, the location in New Orleans is there, which, hey, me, Marvin, Dan, and I have all been there together on a trip. And God, maybe Dan, we even went to Anne Rice's house together. We must have.
Yeah, we did.
So you've been along these streets that you see in the show. They did film in New Orleans, and you see Jackson
it looked very
Square there.
Authentic to what I remember seeing around there.
Exactly.
Although their shots of Storyville aren't in Storyville, it's actually in the French Quarter. But
right. Yes. But I meant, like, it felt very familiar and local to like what New Orleans was when I was
Storyville
there.
rarely had 2-story houses and balconies that way. Storyville was more.
So Dan's been, so you can speak to at least the on-set set dressing authenticity of.
Oh, that's beyond reproach for this show. This show is in terms of the technical
production
excellence.
Design is like impeccable all across the board. Like, and hair and makeup on Louis too, like fantastic.
It's amazing.
I love how they gave him more like otherworldly youth in the present.
Yes. And he instantly stands out just because of his skin complexion. It's amazing.
Yeah. He's so much rougher and like human in the past. It's great.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And all of that are these little details that you're talking about are all lifted from the source material. What you're seeing in terms of like the essence of the characters, the way they carry themselves, the small details of what they look like, even the nails on the vampires, like all of that is definitely true to the book. So it's kind of like the world, the essence of the characters, the atmosphere is true to it, but obviously the storylines and the way it's presented for a modern day audience is where the creative liberties are taken. That being said, I will just say right now, of course, I would stay tuned. I did stay tuned.
Although we should preface for people who are listening, Sarah and I have only seen the first season. We haven't seen the second season yet, which people have said is amazing. We just haven't had time to see it. It has been getting
great reviews, and season 3 is currently in production.
Are they going through... Are they still covering original source material in season 2, or have they?
They should be.
Yes, they are. Season 2 is when Claudia comes into the picture, which is the
she already came into the picture in season 1,
but more comes into the picture. Like there's more of her story.
I saw just a glimpse of Claudia in the the previews of like the upcoming episodes, and I was like, oh shit, they get a daughter, because I didn't know. And
yeah. So it's and that is of course true to the book. Claudia is very much a character and supposed to be a stand-in for Louis. Did have, I believe he had a daughter, and there's this whole storyline of, she's a forever child, and how you deal with that. And the show definitely brings that in later on in the season and addresses that more in season 2 and all of that. So yeah, so that's all there. Lots of things happen. But I will say, in terms of AMC seems to have really made a great choice in picking up the Anne Rice properties, because currently Interview with the Vampire is wildly successful. And currently they have, currently there is the Mayfair Witches.
Which is terrible.
The Mayfair Witches, which is a show that we watched and we didn't like. we didn't like that as much.
We watched the whole thing because we wanted to give it the same shake as we did Interview with the Vampire, but it was immediately not as good. And it's kind of comical, actually, in a lot of spots that when it's unintentionally comical.
So basically, AMC is now creating this, what they're calling Anne Rice's immortal universe. So they're trying to create a whole universe as akin to probably the Marvel universe, the DC universe. I don't know, whatever.
Which isn't difficult because canonically those books do all take place in the same universe. So
yes, they do. And then also, so there's Interview with the Vampire, which is the first series in the immortal universe. There was Mayfair Witches, which I believe did well, but not as well as Interview with the Vampire.
Not nearly as well, yeah.
And then they have also greenlit and are doing the Talamasca, which is a third series that they're shooting. And basically the Talamasca is a secretive group featured in all of Anne Rice's novels.
Right.
And so it's kind of another tie-in. Again, I think the Immortal Universe is honestly a really good direction for this because it is what it is. I mean, there's also Ramses too. I'm sure they're going to make a Ramses.
They have to do Ramses. You got to have the vampires, the witches, and the mummies.
The mummies. Yeah,
like this just feels like an attempt to supplant the Universal Monsterverse.
But it's more interesting in my opinion. And the Talamasca is actually, it's funny because in the Immortals universe or the dark universe at Universal.
Did Anne Rice write a Wolfman?
No, I don't think she did. No.
Dang. What about an Invisible Man?
No, well, see, those are not in the realm of Invisible Man. I don't think is in the realm of like a classic thing.
Okay, what was there a creature or swamp lagoon?
There's a swamp. There's a swamp.
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
It's not Swamp Thing. That's DC Comics. Yeah, the creature from the Black Lagoon. That's what it would be. Yeah.
So the Talamasca is kind of interesting because it's a secretive group that's featured in a lot of her novels.
They're the MIB.
And the logline for the show states it'll focus on the men and women responsible for tracking and containing witches, vampires, and other creatures.
So more like BPRD.
Scattered around the globe. I
think it's going to be so corny. I don't really like that premise.
I think it's going to be really good. I actually really am.
Because one of the funnier parts of Mayfair Witches was when the Talamasca showed up and they were like, oh, well, I have this ability. Like it was like the worst part of the Dark Universe with fucking Russell Crowe's character in The Mummy being like, well, I'm Dr. Jekyll, and I'm part of this universe or this organization that lets me like investigate paranormal shit, Tom Cruise. And I feel like they're going to use the Talamasca show as this way of like really cornily
sounds
connecting
like some
everything.
Extraordinary gentleman.
Yeah, I don't think they need to do it that way. Part of what makes Anne Rice stuff compelling is that it can take melodrama but make it feel believable and make it feel tangible. Whereas the part of why Mayfair Witches failed is that they put that melodramatic tone in a modern setting and then added in this like covert modern group that tracks witches and vampires. And you're like, this is so corny. Like, don't do this. But
that would exist. You know it would, right? Like,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't
just
need
to be clear, though, did this organization appear in this episode at all?
No, it doesn't appear in the show at all. It appears in Mayfair Witches, and it's actually part of the problem with Mayfair Witches.
It might if we keep watching the show. So
I don't know.
Maybe down the line. That's the through line. But
so corny.
Just to go over a general storyline of the show and this pilot. So we basically start off this show in modern day COVID times of all times, which is
and it's actually a big part of the tone because
it is.
They keep alluding to the fact that this feels like an almost apocalyptic time, which is interesting.
It's strange because it's so specific to the time in which this show was created, but like it kind of works. Like I don't know.
Yeah. I think tonally it makes sense.
I mean, I used to like really feel weird when like modern day TV during the pandemic would have people like wearing masks and stuff in the background. I used to be like, oh, that's weird. Like I don't know if I like that. But in this case, when they're referencing the pandemic, the beginning, Daniel Malloy, the journalist, he's initially on the phone with his doctor and he's like, I don't know if I should come into the doctor's office.
Can I say something about the very beginning?
Yeah,
I was so impressed at the sound design accuracy of that commercial he had. That
it tricked Sarah too. It was great.
Like I had a brief moment of like, is this an ad for something else? Like, is Angela Anaconda going to show up and team up with Greymon?
Yeah, it tricked me too. I actually was just like, oh, what the fuck? There's ads on this? You know, like also, I was pissed.
I just want to say the changes to Daniel Malloy's character from the original movie, so much better. This guy's like an actual character now instead of just some guy.
Anthony Bourdain injected with House.
He's literally Anthony Bourdain. Like his dialogue reads like something out of Kitchen Confidential.
Yeah, but he's like as confrontational as House.
Yeah.
He's very hostile and grumpy. Yeah. Which is interesting because, obviously the original, again, the original interviewer was much younger, right? Like youth, right? Mm-hmm. So this journalist is in the future, right? And
I do love that angle where it's like, let's do it over now that we are older and more mature and less stupid.
Yeah.
And we're grumpier.
Although it is fascinating how Louis also feels this way, having lived so much longer.
Yes, so, he is itching. So Daniel Malloy receives these mysterious boxes of tapes. And while he's on the phone with his doctor about his declining health, we assume that he's not healthy right now. He's, it's clear something's going on. And he's saying like, do I have to really come into the doctor's office? I don't want to be exposed to COVID. I don't know if they don't mention COVID specifically.
They don't say it specifically, but I think it's great because that
they say
scene,
a bug,
that scene demonstrates that he's also like an avoidant guy. Like he's using it as an excuse to not come into the doctor's office because he wants to just not think about his illness, right. Like he wants to not think about the things that are wrong with his life.
Which makes, when he does receive this package of old tapes from his past with an interview with the vampire, which is where we're jumping off into modern day, he journeys to Dubai which modern is noted. Which is modern day Dubai, which is quite the journey. In
he's willing to take a huge risk. When we just saw a little scene where he was not willing to go to the doctor's office as an excuse. So there's something very compelling. Yeah.
He's compelled. He's invested, even though he seems pretty grumpy and over life and kind of like, whatever. I don't want to do this. He is compelled to want to follow up on this interview from his youth. So that is where he meets Louis, and Louis is trying to convince him to like, hey, we're older, we're wiser, let's do a do-over. Which
is so cool. This is the part that made me love the show instantly because I was like, this is so cool because, and this is something I was actually talking about with Dan during our Pluto recap at the end, where I was like, I really hope that I wasn't so enamored with this metafiction that's what sort of drew me towards liking the whole thing. And it still gets me, but then I'm also realizing that's definitely not the only thing that got me with the show. But it's a great hook. It's a great hook because I don't think that necessarily worked on Dan, but for someone who is at least tangentially familiar with the properties, and especially for someone like Sarah, who's intimately familiar with the properties, this is like, whoa, what's going on? Like, it's very different. Like,
that is a turn. Like, but that's
it's a great way to let the audience who is very familiar with Anne Rice's works know, hey, we're going to do something different. I hope you like it, and I think it's really cool. Yeah.
It's in a way in both the show and in reality saying, we're going to do a do-over. We're going to do a retelling. We're going to rehash this. It's an excellent way to jump off.
Like I'll offer a thought that's going through my fresh brain here.
Yeah, I am curious because you're not familiar, so I'm curious.
It's not a do-over for you, Dan.
Yeah, it's not a do-over for me. Like they do explicitly state that it is a do-over, so like I'm able to gather that context and everything. But with this context, I am forced to wonder what is new to this version of the story, or this story is a continued fascination with Daniel from Louis. Like he followed Daniel for however many years after the original interview, and you're kind of wondering like, why did he?
What are you gonna do if you're living forever? You get bored. You're like,
but it is interesting.
Okay, my the best theory though is he was like, so when's that interview coming out? I'm really excited about it.
He did publish it.
I wanted to put it on my resume and,
I think he did publish it. Didn't he publish it in the context of a show, or was it never published? I forget.
I think in the show they say that he never mentions a vampire in his books or anything.
Right.
And Daniel's like, well, people don't believe that I interviewed a fucking vampire.
Right.
Like they would never. So I never wrote it out.
Right.
I'm not stupid.
Yeah, exactly. So, they kind of sit together in his Dubai tinted window apartment in the sky, which, they kind of address the whole vampire thing. Hey, it's daylight out. How are you talking to me? But it's clear that Louis has a setup in his Dubai apartment that allows him to have like tinted windows, and he's still very much affected by the sun, which he demonstrates to.
They're setting up the rules,
Mr. Malloy, that yes, he cannot be in the sun. So they kind of hash it out, and it's clear that Mr. Malloy, Daniel Malloy, wants to jump right into it. But yes, as Marvin mentioned, they definitely played this casting. I do love the casting of Daniel Malloy, played by, let me get the actor's name, Eric Bogan's son.
Or is it Bogosian?
Bogosian? I'm terrible at pronouncing things.
Before this, he was most popular for being in Law & Order Criminal Intent as the police chief, and where he played pretty much the same actor, same performance.
Okay.
Prickly Anthony Bourdain, but as a cop.
Yeah, right. He's definitely portrayed as like, the first time I saw him, I was like, oh, this is like a weird Anthony Bourdain, like very prickly, like you said, very aggressive and
opinionated, and he moralizes about things. He's very specific about his beliefs. Yeah.
So in the room with them is an unknown assistant, helper, keeper, handler of some kind. We're not formally introduced at this point, but that person, Louis at that point is like, hey, let's let Mr. Malloy rest a little, and then we'll get to the interview later. And clearly Daniel Malloy is like, no, I don't want to rest. Let's get right fucking into it, which kind of reaffirms his interest in which reaffirms his interest in continuing this story and learning more. So it's from that point, I believe, we now flash into the show, the past, the story, the rehashing of what actually happened and how it actually went down.
Which I have a feeling that's probably something that Anne Rice took real offense to, because she was probably like, oh, you're now claiming this is the real story. Well, that's bullshit.
I don't know, because she's not alive. So I don't want to theorize too much on the creative direction.
I mean, I find that quite plausible.
I don't know where the creative differences occurred, but I don't know. She's dead, and her son is under heavy NDA, I'm sure. So I would love to one day know. But
one thing I want to point out before I forget. So in the middle of that first meeting with Louis, again, when he re-meets him, he says, the last time we met up, things didn't go so well. And he points to the bite marks on his neck, right? That's signaling to the audience, we're actually more concerned with the continuity from the movie. Because in the book, the bite mark, there is no ending where the interview, Daniel is bitten on the neck. In the book, it ends with Daniel being so enthralled by Louis' story that he wants to be a vampire himself. And then Louis goes, you don't understand. You do not want this. And then Daniel goes, well, fuck you. I'm going to leave. I'm going to find Lestat and make him turn me into a vampire. Right. And that's where the book ends. The people who made the movie thought they needed to have a more dramatic ending. So in the movie, Christian Slater, who plays the Daniel Malloy character, drives off in search of Lestat. Lestat literally flies into his car.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And it's implied that that's when he talks to him, does his own interview, and probably bites him. So the fact that he's bitten on the neck in this show seems to suggest that they're going through by the continuity of the movie, which is interesting.
Wait, the continuity of the movie. So that continuity is saying that Lestat is the one that bit Malloy?
Yes. The movie insinuates that.
That's one of the last scenes.
Yeah. It's like the stinger at the end. Oh.
So when Malloy says, that didn't go so well, he's saying Lestat fucking came for me.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what he's saying.
Yes.
And that's a movie thing only. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's clearly the show is drawing from both Neil Jordan's film from 1994 and from the Anne Rice novel. They're kind of mixing and matching things. So essentially, as we flash into the past, we're introduced to Louis, who in this TV series is a Black man. He makes his money by running brothels in houses in the neighborhood of Storyville in New Orleans in the earliest 20th century.
Which they did because Storyville has been historically a Black neighborhood in New Orleans, whereas everywhere else was predominantly white businesses. Storyville was one of the few places historically where Black people were allowed to run businesses. So
yes,
and they do say as much in the show.
Yeah.
And I do love, again, the historical accuracy, because I do feel that if this was how the world really worked and this story actually happened,
right,
maybe it actually did, we don't know. I feel like it would make sense that Louis is a Black man in New Orleans at this time. It makes sense to me. So
well, it's narratively more interesting. I think the original story, at least in the movie, he's kind of an uninteresting character until he becomes a vampire, because he's just a rich white guy on the plantation who becomes enamored with a vampire. And whereas this one, you have this underlying cultural subtext of, I'm a Black man struggling to survive in a city that barely accepts me. If I went anywhere else, they wouldn't. So I barely get by here. And it changes the dynamic of their relationship. It's ultimately more specifically about Lestat having power over Louis through the illusion of Lestat pretending he understands Louis' plight as a Black man, and or trying to sympathize with him. He goes, "Oh, in this country they treat you like crap, because you're because of the color of your skin, etc." And that's his way of luring him, because he realizes he's looking for that type of validation. But if you know the story of Interview with the Vampire, it's ultimately one about essentially domestic violence, because he treats Louis like crap. So
that's too bad. I was rooting for them.
That's what they want, because especially in the beginning part of you do kind of root for them. You're kind of like, oh cool, this is cool, they're becoming like this power couple that's creating this thing.
Hold on though. Do you not think Lestat in this show is just a teeny bit manipulative?
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying
that's literally what I was saying. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were trying to say you were like, okay, in the books or in the original 1994 movie, Lestat is pretty abusive to Louis.
Yeah. No, it's always been a story about an abusive relationship. I mean, the movie they don't quite explicitly make it gay, but it's so heavily implied from the way they're living together.
And that is something that maintains. That is also very accurate to the books and the movie. So that is not a modern day adaptation.
Can't believe they made Anne Rice woke.
They just made it more on the nose. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There was definitely these themes.
Can't believe they added sexual tension to vampires.
Lots of sexual tension. And that's very much present in the book, which, I'm sure younger me very much appreciated at the time. So basically, he runs a string of brothels in Storyville. His father has recently passed away, and he's kind of now the son that is taking care of his family. We're introduced to his sister, who's going to get married soon. They're preparing for that. His mom, who seems like a very respected and put together lady.
Another point worth noting is that prior to the father passing away, the family fortune was made on sugarcane and not brothels.
Yes.
I think that's an allusion to the fact that originally he was a sugarcane plantation owner in the book. So I think they're kind of alluding to the fact that
again, like making references, but also acknowledging we're departuring from that, right?
That also adds to the plausible deniability of, in his original telling, he could have not wanted to talk about the brothels. So he just told in the interview, I own a sugarcane plantation, So it makes it a little more plausible.
It works out like meta-narratively.
Yeah. Which is like all of that type of attention to detail is part of why I really like the show. Because it's just like oh yeah, that is thought about. Like they is a very well thought out show. Like they didn't just remake something. Like every single aspect of why the characters are the way they are and it's a very character driven show.
So this is the Resident Evil remake 2 of Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, kind of, in the sense that like it's true to the original feeling.
I want to watch Matt McMuscle's What Happened episode about this interview because it took so fucking long to come out.
So he runs the brothels. You're introduced to his family, which I think they have this complicated relationship with his brother Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul claims to hear voices in his head through little birds, and it's God's voice. Head. And yeah, the family is a little remiss. They're not sure how to handle him all the time, but they love him nonetheless. And they're very close. The family seems very tight-knit to me. I don't know if you got that impression, Dan, but this family seems like they're pretty tight-knit. And Paul and Louis are close, and Paul especially very much cares about his sister, Grace.
Yes.
Like, have either of you guys seen American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright?
No, I really wanted to, but I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But I know what you're talking about in terms of the...
It's a good movie, but like I just got like shades or vibes of that movie in the domestic family settings of like the scenes between Louis and his like family with his brother and stuff. It feels like a dysfunctional black family that has, a little more well off than the typical black family of its time.
Right. And we also skipped over the part at the beginning where Louis has to take care of Bender, who got hit in the head.
Oh yeah, John DiMaggio's in it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How could we
they gave him an end pass.
Yeah, Bender gets an end pass. And then that also is eventually leads into the confrontation with his brother in the street, who is trying to street preach at his brothel, in front of his brothel.
Yes.
Right.
Which leads to the confrontation of him, because he needs to act like a tough guy. He pretends he's going to stab his brother. And that makes Lestat in the street go, oh.
It catches his eye.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing for Lestat to be intrigued by, out of all the things Louis has done so far.
He is intrigued, and also, yeah, this guy, he's at the brothel, and he tries to, without permission, stick his pee-pee in one of the back ends of one of the ladies of the night there, and she didn't sit well with her, and her dinner ended up on his pee-pee, essentially. And it's funny, it's comical, it's a good little slice of life scene. I enjoyed it. It's funny, and this guy has to have the doctor come in. She hits him over the head. She's like, don't do that, whatever. Like, and I agree, like, that's a no-no, and without prior permission, of course, and discussion about that for sure. So that was fun. And it gives you a slice of life of Louis's nightly job, right? That his family is not entirely sure what he does. They don't ask questions, except for Paul, of course, who goes down there and tries to...
I think they do know. I think they're all very aware. They just politely don't want to talk about it.
Exactly. They just don't want to talk about it,
Because they're, like Lestat alludes to, they are more concerned about maintaining their place in society and their comfort than they are about how they have that place in society and comfort. And as long as Louis is the one doing the dirty work, they can keep their hands clean. And they just reap the spoils, because Louis is, like, as he said, the favorite son. And I think he means that in a way of begrudgingly, because he didn't want this responsibility. Like, his father died, handed him over a failing business, and he had to do whatever they did to survive. And it's not something he's proud of. It's clear from the very beginning. When you go to that church scene, it's clear that he's like, I do what I do. It's like he doesn't have regrets about it, but he clearly doesn't feel great about it either.
Yeah, definitely. And this also sets up kind of like the abundance of the night scenes we're going to experience, because Louis does this brothel stuff on the side, kind of explains why he's always up and around at night. Vampires can only be up and around at night. So it's kind of nicely melting together the impending storylines, right? So it's, again, a nicely written addition to this original source content, which did not at all go like this. Louis was not did not own brothels or anything like that. But this is a nice addition. I love that. And it's setting us up for the, of course, turn to vampire. So that's what we are introduced to Lestat. And Lestat is right off the bat charming, magnetic, romantic, French, very French. He's
you meet
played
him at
by
the competing brothel.
Yes. He's played by Sam Reed. Sam Reed, I believe, is is he Australian? Yeah, I was gonna say Australian. So he's Australian, so he's got to put on that French accent, And
I think Jacob Anderson's English.
I think you're right.
Yes.
He's British.
Yeah. So both of them have to put on an accent, and I'm not offended by the accents. They're not perfect.
No, they're fine. They're great. Yeah.
They're not offensive.
Yeah.
They don't take me out necessarily.
I think it helps that you're in a melodramatic context, so the slightly elevated accents and how they're a little more affected than they would be if they were natural. Totally makes sense because we're in a melodrama, so it works.
Right. So they meet. They're talking up over a shared lover, Lily, and they kind of strike up an intense conversation. They kind of have a bit of a rivalry going on, but also kind of an intense underlying romance that you see is budding. I would love to know your opinion, Dan, coming into this, not seeing the movie previously, reading the books. I, of course, knew already what this relationship was going to be, but that first scene when Louis, Lily, and Lestat sit down at the brothel together, what is your impressions of their relationship, who they are?
Well, I didn't go on completely. The one piece of context I did have about this particular show, and I didn't know if it applied to past versions of the story, was that it was gay. There was gay stuff in it.
And I knew that it was gay.
Yeah, and it was just mentioned along. Yeah, like it was part of the discourse. And so that was one of the things that I remembered about it, because when Lestat shows up, being as suave and charismatic as he is, and he has to become a vampire somehow, it's clear that this is the beginning of a relationship between these two. Although the bidding war plays out kind of like it's a very crass scene, but it is kind of funny.
Well, I think it's a demonstration of the fact that, because he has a good line where he says it was both emasculation and I forget what the other term was, like impressant or like, I forget.
I feel, I know what line you're talking about. I just don't remember the actual word he used.
But basically, he's saying he's very attractive. I'm very attracted to him, but he also really wants to control me. And that's exactly what their relationship is. He is truly attracted to Louis. It's a genuine attraction, but it's an attraction where he wants to then be in control once he's in there. So they set the tone for that immediately. And Louis doesn't like it, which I think is interesting, because I don't think that's the way it happens in the original.
It is. So this is very true to that. That's what I mean by the structures of the characters are maintained. This is very much how it plays out in the book.
But there's not the context of the misunderstanding of him being black and all that stuff. So that's,
but very much the core of like exactly what you were saying is like there's this intense attractive relationship, but there's also this control aspect to it. Like the core of the relationship and the profiles of the characters remain the same to the original.
No, what I meant
content.
was that he didn't like it at first.
Louis didn't like it. No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Louis absolutely is true to acting in truth to the source material throughout this show. That is accurate. He did not like it. He did not want to be part of it. He hated it. He rebelled against it, but yet at the same time was drawn in and controlled, and it was like a puppet. But it's like he couldn't resist. But at the same time, absolutely hated it, hated his life, tried to get away from Lestat. All of that maintains.
No, I meant in their initial meeting.
Initial meeting as well. Well,
because in the initial meeting, doesn't he go, I could turn you into a vampire? And he goes, okay.
No.
Right? And it's after that where he has a despondency.
No, when he met him, he was despondent about his life because his family
Right.
Which version are we talking about right now?
The book.
Okay.
I think the movie does that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, he did not. That is very true to the book. Like there is this tug and pull relationship between them. In the book, Louis is distraught by the death of his younger brother, Paul, which is accurate. And he's approached by Lestat. And Louis is so overcome with grief. Lestat turns Louis into a vampire to become his companion.
Right.
Initially Louis is wowed by the extraordinary life of being a vampire and things like that and everything that comes with that. But eventually he's disenchanted with the vampire life and Lestat and, the way Lestat treats people he kills and things like that. And so, there is this tension that I feel is preserved in the show and remains true to the source material, in my opinion.
Oh, I finally found the word. It's emasculation and admiration in equal measure.
Admiration.
Right,
yes.
Right, yeah.
Which is a very good line.
And to me, that feels true to the source material. It does. And I actually really love the dynamic. To me, this is good storytelling and character building, like having these dynamic feelings at play. It makes the world very dimensional. And I think that's very essential when you're talking about a pilot.
I don't know why, but I got slightly irritated at the murder scene of the guy putting out streetlights. And one of them just keeps lighting up again because I guess Lestat's an asshole.
Yes.
He kind of is. So he likes toying with his victims.
That's just like, God damn it.
So yeah, speaking of that, they kind of mentioned this flu plague sickness, which again is very similar to the pandemic. It's like all matching up in a weird way.
Yeah.
And people in New Orleans are dropping dead, right? And we know as this audience, the reason for that is because Lestat is in town and he needs to feed on blood like vampires do. And so he's been killing people and drinking their blood, and people are starting to take notice, of course. Louis and Lestat's relationship starts off as a business interest, or they play it off that way to onlookers.
Well, it starts off when their actual relationship starts off when Lestat shows up at their card game, his weekly card game.
Yes, he's at the card game, but this is a card game with people that Louis does business with. It's like I guess equivalent to like the golf course type things in modern day. You meet up with the cards with the boys for some Sazeracs and play some cards. Yeah, and I love that too. Like there's so many. We touched on the production design and the authenticity, and they did shoot in the French Quarter. They did shoot on location. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, my favorite city in America, you would know that a lot of that stuff is preserved and it's true to the time period. So I love that they chose to stay true to what would have been from that time period, using things from that time period that actually still exist in New Orleans, like Jackson Square in front of the St. Louis Cathedral. If you go to New Orleans, you can actually see, actually next time I go, I'm going to try to find Lestat's house. It's there, so that the green colored ironwork that's becomes very well known from the show. I kind of want to go find it and take a picture in front of it. But these are all very real places that exist in New Orleans today. And the set dressing is very accurate. The clothing, it's a very well dressed set, and production design is done very well, and costuming and makeup and hair. All of that, to me, they knocked it out of the park. 110%. Very impressed. Also with the effects, the blood. Obviously, there's a lot of blood, a lot of violence and things like that. And I thought it was pretty well done.
Yeah, there are little like key bits of gore. One guy gets a fist through his head.
Just a little bit.
That was just a slight, surprise in the moment.
Which is what they want. It's like one of the few times where like they're trying to shock you with the violence.
Right.
And, I like that it's supposed to be the juxtaposition of this shocking violence combined with this juxtaposed with this romantic moment, essentially, of turning him. It's kind of like, I don't like this movie that much, but that scene from Drive where what's his name? Fucking handsome man.
Ryan Gosling.
Right, Ryan Gosling is in the elevator with Michelle Williams, I think that's her name is. Was it Michelle Williams? I forget.
I don't know.
I forget. But well, basically, it's the juxtaposition of the fact that he's like, okay, there's a bad guy in the elevator with us, but he doesn't realize we're here yet. I'm going to kiss you romantically because we have had this romantic tension the whole movie, and then I'm going to stomp this guy's head into a pulp. And that's kind of like the exact kind of like juxtaposition happening in this scene where it's just like, I love you, Louis. And this dark surrounded by gore.
Yes. Well, you kind of get a window into Lestat's psyche, you know, he will love bomb you. He will manipulate you. He will punch his fist through somebody's head for you. You know, it's very scary. And you're also introduced to the super strength, you know, and going back to the card game, you're kind of introduced to some of the powers or tricks as Louis likes to call it. He keeps saying like, oh, he's got tricks, you know, he's tricky, you know, and I kind of love that because it's like almost like I don't want to, in true New Orleans fashion, when you go there, you get a sense like, you know, something's up. This place is different. It's tricky, right? There's things that happen that shouldn't happen. Gas lamps go on and turn on again. It's haunted. It's witchy. It's spiritual. It's all of these things. And people can do and say things that they shouldn't be able to do or say. So during this card game...
The tour guides will tell you that.
The tour guides will tell you that, yes. During this card game, we're introduced to that. You know, the vampires are able to...
I think it's good because you don't... Yeah. These are not traditional vampire powers. So
they don't sparkle.
No, but
that's like not traditional at all.
No, but the idea of them being able to, like, compelling is a traditional vampire power, but the ability to stop time, that's really new. The ability
which essentially gives them super speed at the same time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think it's implied that's how he gets to super speed.
Working that out, yeah.
He does. Yeah. So it seems like the bag of tricks that Lestat is capable of that were shown in this pilot is he's telekinetic. Compelling.
Yeah,
he's telekinetic. He can speak to you through his mind telepathically. Yeah. He can slow down and manipulate time. It seems
he can levitate while butt naked.
He can levitate while naked. Yes,
and the person he's touching can be given the levitation power at the same time,
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's like
you
Superman.
Know? He can fly.
Louis is Lestat's Lois Lane.
Can you read my mind?
Yeah.
So
that's a clip. You put that together, you know?
There you go.
So Lestat also has super strength. He can punch a fucking hole through your head.
That's classic. That's a classic power. Super strength.
What else?
Head hole punching, classic.
Things. It's not explicitly said in the pilot, but you see a lot of evidence of it. Is things grow super fast for vampires. They have long hair, long nails. It's just like things are expedited. Their eyes, they have super sight. Their eyes are, you know, it happens later on in the episode. All their senses are
enhanced, yeah.
Yes, all senses are enhanced. And that's something very true to the novel. It happens when Lestat first turns Louis.
Does that mean they hate farts more than anyone?
Oh, fucking, it's just the worst. Sure. Yeah.
So senses are super, super heightened. And they can also, I feel like in this show, what other tricks did we see Lestat do? He did quite a bit.
Well, they're also show some of those traits as being like, they have this hyper, like, youthful appearance constantly.
Yes.
I mean, like, they I know they were in contacts as vampires, but they have also clearly color graded their eyes to make them like hyper pop out.
And that is also an aspect.
Yeah, they take on like an aqua color.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like blue. And they also, the blue eyes is something that is in the Ramses series when you get turned into a mummy. Oh. When you get turned into a mummy, an immortal mummy, you get blue eyes.
So is that implying immortality is blue eyes?
Blue eyes. If you have blue eyes, you're immortal. So I do like that carryover because it's such a big thing in the Ramsey series, because when you become a mummy, it's like everyone's just like, wait, didn't you have brown eyes? Like, I'm so confused. Like, why do you have blue eyes now?
Okay.
You know? Okay. And it's a big tell. And that actually happens later on in the series. Everyone's just like, all his family members and friends are like,
Louis, what happened to your eyes?
What the fuck, man? How did you get? Why do you have blue eyes now? Yeah, and then he's just like, don't worry about it. You know, like shit happens. You know, like how do you get blue eyes? You know, that's kind of a big tell, right?
Because I'm a pimp. That's why.
yeah. They also have super healing abilities. They can heal pretty quickly from their wounds. And, you know, so if Lestat gets roughed up a bit the night before, no worries. Usually by the next day, he's all healed and everything.
Yeah, they also show that the weakness obviously is the sun. It's classic, you know.
Yes. I just have a question.
Yeah.
Did other versions of Interview with the Vampire also show off this level of disdain and irreverence for organized religion and God?
I don't think so. Not in the movie.
Because they make it very clear that none of that shit works.
I think that might be, yeah.
I'm gonna say not like this so hard and fast. No.
Yeah, especially since Anne Rice herself for most of her life is Catholic. So
yes, but then strongly renounced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lestat, just straight up storming into the church and killing the priest, straight out of the confession box.
Literally having a speech saying "fuck religion." I tried to be religious once, but my dad convinced me that religion's fake. Fuck you all. You know.
Yeah. So there's nothing in the church that is harming him in any sort of way. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that shit doesn't work on him. Like crosses and silver.
No, exactly. And that's also another thing that gets dispelled, right? Because you think, oh, vampires, maybe they can't enter the church.
So that was one of my questions. Is that how it was in the book as well?
Yeah, that stuff doesn't work. They love wearing crosses and stuff. There's no
they love it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to track where the subversions first occurred.
Yes. So with the Anne Rice vampires,
I think the rules of how vampires work they've kept completely intact. I don't think they've tried to change that.
Not,
Does the whole you have to invite them in thing play a fairly big part in this? Okay, then no.
That's not a thing either. Yeah, all of those.
I think it does.
Not in the Anne Rice ones. I don't believe. God, I mean, again, it's been a while since I've read the.
I'm pretty sure because I think it becomes a problem later in the series with his own house because technically it stops being his house.
Double check.
Oh wait, no, that's not okay. It isn't. It is not required in the. Oh, I think that was more of later in the series, more of a personal, I paid for this house type of thing, and that's why there's an issue. Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think there's but that is a vampire trope, right? The garlic, the cross.
There's no garlic issue. Yeah.
There's no. They don't need to eat or drink or anything like that to survive. Food.
Yeah. If anything, they say later that human food tastes like crap, like it's awful.
Yes, in the book they don't like it. It doesn't taste very good. But then Lestat, in his initial meeting with Louis, he talks about the amazing food in New Orleans, which is
he's just lying because he's in mixed company, so he's just gonna pretend that the food was amazing. But for him, the only thing that sates any vampire is blood, and human blood is the best because animal blood is fine and it'll work. But
human blood is the most nourishing. Animal blood is like a temporary. If there are no humans around, which in the book, Louis does have a stint of feeding on rats, but it's not very good for him.
Yeah.
He becomes too rat-like. He takes on their traits. I mean, Castlevania taught me that if you kill enough things, you gain their traits.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, even the Anne Rice vampires, they can heal from pretty crazy wounds and stuff. So that's... Yeah. Now we're at the part where this card game. So, it's kind of referenced about Louis standing as a Black man and as a business owner, and he's kind of being shit on a bit by people, not taken seriously. And Louis kind of building him up through his telepathy, and it's like, no, man, you deserve more than 10%, more than 15%, don't let them treat you like shit. He's kind of building him up and trying to get him to see his true potential. He's trying to make a friend out of Louis.
He also cheats for him.
Yeah,
he also changes the cards on the table while stopping time that he gets a jackpot.
He does.
He takes
He does. And he's trying to show Louis like, hey, I'm in your corner. I'm on your side. I'm your friend. I like you. I'm going to use my tricks to help you.
I think what I find interesting is that Louis finds it strange, but is not scared. So I think he's
not scared.
I think it's like a test too. I think Lestat is trying to test Louis into being like, okay, if I show you this crazy ass power, which clearly isn't normal, how are you going to react? Are you still my friend? And Louis quietly accepts by taking the card, right? So to me, it's more of like him slowly seducing him into his world. And Lestat wants to take it slow. As a vampire who's immortal, he doesn't mind taking his time. So he's just taking it slow and being like, I'll tell you in a week what's really going on. I'll show you a little bit more later, etc.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You
just remind me of a moment that I thought was just a little bit too thick, like leg it on a bit too thick. But it was like, there you go, jumping ahead. Let it seduce you.
Oh, yeah.
Vampires are sexy.
Well, I think it's because he can't help but want to try to control the narrative again. And he's annoyed that Malloy is going to the factual details when Louis still wants to be like, look, I want you to feel the emotions of what I was feeling. And that is expounded more on later, where it's like he is still not being he's still an unreliable narrator. The beginning of the show implies he was always an unreliable narrator at the very beginning, and then this show starts off with like, well, maybe he's going to tell the truth now, and ultimately he's not.
Unreliable narrator is one of my less favorite tropes.
Okay. Well, I find it interesting because there tends to be a juxtaposition of what you see versus what he says. And I think that's a fun thing to play with.
Yeah.
I just don't like being told that things that I thought were real were not.
Oh, I don't think the show does it that way. I think it's more of that there are things about his past that he doesn't want to talk about, so he'll gloss over them. And then Dan will be like, what the fuck? Why are you?
Yeah, like when I'm talking about like unreliable narrator, I'm talking about like something more like structural, I guess. Something more like 12 Monkeys or...
Well, okay, well, that's a cheat. That's not
like
even
when it's just straight cheating, but then that's because it's literally unreliable, like it's unreliable footage.
But that's not an unreliable narrator as a narrative mechanic. That's just cheating, like cheating technically. Like the filmmakers cheated by showing you different footage, so that isn't the unreliable narrator trope to me. That's just manipulative filmmaking.
And some people like it.
Well, I think some people literally didn't realize it wasn't the same footage. I think that's part of the issue. Same for the conversation. I think some people literally thought it was the same footage the whole time, and it wasn't.
So stupid.
I just wanted to mention that Daniel Malloy actually has Parkinson's disease.
Right.
That was the illness he was dealing with. Which
narratively gives him would potentially give him even more incentive to want to become a vampire to survive his Parkinson's. But he clearly disdains it. Which is
Louis kind of alludes to that.
Yeah.
Like, you sure don't want to become a vampire? Like,
no, and then old and
happens. You're sick. Which is a departure from the way the original novel ended. Like in the original novel, his story seduced him to the idea of being a vampire so much. He was like, please turn me,
But he's also not old and grumpy and dealing with Parkinson's,
Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah. A more vain person would have been like, sure, I'll become a vampire to survive it. But there's something about him that I think he... not just a life experience, but I think he has realized there's a great line I learned. You hear earlier on where he goes like, maybe it wasn't a story worth telling. You're not even sure of the value of your own story. And it sort of implies that Daniel sort of as a third person observer understands the important parts of Louis' story more than Louis does, who is too close to it and is protective over certain parts of it. And
right. I kind of wanted to expand on that line we talked about earlier, which I found the further one. Emasculation and admiration in equal measure. I wanted to murder the man, and I wanted to be the man. I came there for Lily, and I left only thinking of him. I love that line. Like, that's another thing I want to touch on is I feel this show is very well written.
Is that in the book?
Written. No.
It can't be, because Lily's not in the book at all.
No. Yeah, this is all the script.
See, that's what I found really odd, because some of the criticism of the show was that they said some of the writing was too, like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, not poetic. It was like too blunt.
Oh, I don't know who said that, but I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like it's great writing. It's like it's tonally.
I think some people are taking flowery prose as blunt prose.
Maybe, but to me, it's more of like you're writing the line between melodrama and understanding the character.
I think it's beautiful, and if you're the type of Anne Rice fan and Christopher Rice fan I am, this writing I feel like is right up our alley. Like I love the prose. I love the style.
Do you think it's true to the tone? And
I do. I absolutely think the writers stayed true to the tone for sure. And that's why I do really love this series. And so after the card game, you know, basically Lestat's like, these are racist fucks. Don't hang out with them. They're dumb.
Hang out with me.
Yeah, they start hanging out. Louis is
good racist.
Yeah, he's the French, the white French, as his sister puts it. So Louis is showing him around town. He takes him to the opera. They get wardrobes.
Fun little montage.
Fun little montage.
Fun little Pretty Woman montage. Going around.
And Grace talks to him and says, hey, you've been hanging out with this white Frenchman a lot. Like, maybe he should come over for dinner. And I love that scene where she's just like, he's like super white, you know?
Yeah. I think this is what does the whole family suspect he's gay? Not just Paul?
Yeah, I think so, because he said, I think there is a line of dialogue when he's talking to...
Paul is willing to say it out loud, but the rest of my family also have the same thoughts, or something like that.
Well, Malloy says that he's done this before.
Now, hold on. We have been saying gay, but are we sure that he is not bi?
So I think he could be bi, for sure.
So specifically, actually, they specifically say Louis is gay, Lestat is bi. So they actually specifically...
So... his time with Lily is he would just talk to her, right?
Yeah, so he's actually, so Louis is gay, like he's just gay.
Yes.
And Lestat is bi. Lestat is pan, like he doesn't care. Like
which later on, when he's talking to Malloy, he says to him like, "Hey, I've come into my sexuality now.
I've embraced."
I was just trying to make sure that we were like keeping it straight, because I suddenly realized,
really? That he's gay.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid the bisexual erasure, because Lestat is bi or pan, depending on
Lestat likes beautiful things, beautiful people
in general. Yeah, he doesn't care. Yeah,
yes, that is true, and that's also true in the book. Oh wait, I forgot to say that he gives his sister an awesome wedding gift to the cruise tickets to Europe.
Right.
Which I learned were actually paid for by Lestat. Apparently. Yeah.
How?
I guess it's implied that...
I think, isn't that like accused? Paul just accuses Lestat for having paid for that stuff, doesn't he?
No. In the dinner scene, it says, because the dinner scene, the son-in-law thanks the mom. Then Paul says, no, mom didn't buy it. Louis did. Also, don't call her mom. She's not your mom. That's what that line is.
Oh, right. It was, he was saying Louis paid for it, not that Lestat paid for it.
Yeah. Where did you learn that Lestat paid for it?
I'm just reading I think that it's implied that he paid for it, but maybe that can be up for argument. I think some people do.
Is this fan speculation? Because I don't think that's in the text necessarily.
I think it's implied, but I don't know. I think it could be either way, you know? So he comes over to dinner. And they're having I gotta say also, I absolutely love Lestat's outfit at the dinner scene with the green tie and the green lamps. Like the production design and the wardrobe in this scene is impeccable. And
he's wearing the green tie because he's trying to hide his vampirism as much as possible. It's the exact opposite of red. So he's trying to pretend, I'm human, don't worry, you know.
I love it. I love the green tie. I love the matching lamps in the back, the green ironwork on his house. Like it all syncs. It all works together. And clearly, Paul is very straightforward, and he asks Lestat, "What exactly is your relationship with my brother? Like, what the fuck is going on?" And Lestat says, we're in business. We go to the opera. We hang out." And
you
then
almost can imagine Paul interrogating him and being like, "You fuck young boys, Lestat."
You know, Paul. I feel like Paul says what everyone's thinking. You know what I mean? We're just like, "Yeah, what the fuck is your deal, bro?" And you know.
He has
basically,
no filter
but then he makes the mistake of asking about God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes into the God thing and asks Lestat if he's Christian, which doesn't go very well. And
I mean, he's critical of Baptists. So he's very much like not just being Christian. It's like, you got to be Catholic, you know? Yeah.
I actually do think it's been a while since I read the novels, but I do think that Lestat does have this same disdain for religion.
Well, I think the backstory
not
of him,
like this. It's not this. This is like there's no scene like this where he explodes or anything like that. But
I think his backstory is he's from a monastery, right?
Yes,
like,
yes, that is.
Yeah,
yep,
so
that is right. That is right from the novel, 100%.
Right.
So they go for a nightcap. And we get to talk about the floating scene now. But essentially, let's set this up. They go for a nightcap to Lestat's awesome house, and Miss Lily is there, and she's been paid for the night to be there. And Lestat has a super nice house. It's like awesomely decorated, and I want my house to look like this. Louis thinks that Lestat has hired Lily to watch him and Lily fuck. Louis and Lily fuck. So he says
he's
to
a
him,
voyeur.
Like, yeah, he's like, "Oh, are you into this? You want to like watch us have sex?" And he's like, "What's your deal? Like, why is she here? Why are we here? Like, what's going on?" And then Lestat also starts to get it undressed, and then I'm just kind of like, "Oh, is this a three-way? Like, are we all gonna have sex together? Who knows? You know, I'm not gonna judge. It all looks very exciting and fun, and hot, definitely hot." And then essentially Lily, I think she is given some kind of drug to have her pass out, go unconscious, whatever. And then we get to the queerness of it all. So in the book, drinking blood is not only a form of life source for vampires, it's also a very like sexual act. It's very intimate, it's erotic, it's hot, it's the way of connecting with people, but it's also a life source. So anytime that happens, you can also assume that it could be for that reason as well. And it could also induce sexual feelings in the victim and feel very euphoric, as Louis describes.
Is it more of an implication in the novels, or is it as direct as it is in this show?
It's direct, like exactly
in terms of
like
the
this.
Sexual desire.
Yes, okay. Absolutely. And Lestat does a little drink, not to kill you, but to have this connection with you. So it's seductive, it's sexy. In the novels, even a mere touch from a vampire can induce feelings of sexual seduction. So even just touching somebody. I don't know if the show goes as far as just touch, but in the novels,
it does, because when he kisses Lily, she's like basically coming.
So even an embrace, a touch, it's completely sexual and seduction and euphoric for the victim. But as you know, it can go too far and they can kill you, and it can be very painful and dangerous, and
just like real life.
Yeah, exactly. and I think the way that they show the euphoric feelings in this awesome scene is the levitation. Like I think it was a really good way to kind of like really show physically some of the feelings, like show to the audience maybe the type of feelings. It might feel like you're floating, flying, very euphoric. So I as cheesy as this could look, the scene of them floating and levitating in this very ornate room, completely naked, I think is a really good comparison to maybe how it might feel. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to name the explicit scene that I want to compare this to, but it's a scene from Black Sails, which is another show with the name word black in it that we watched, where they had a similar gay scene. And this is done so much better than that. Like the one in Black Sails is more of like, you can tell the showrunners are going, look at that. Can you believe we did a gay thing? Isn't that crazy? Whereas in this is like an explosion that these characters are holding back the whole time. Right. And they finally do it. It's not like trying to self-congratulate itself by saying, oh, we did a gay sex scene. Isn't that crazy? It's more of like, no, this is character driven. And yeah, it's a vampire. Like the floating is just going to come with the territory of fucking a vampire. So, and it's a good visual metaphor. I think while you were rewatching it, I saw a good description of it where the type of music that's playing and the way they wrap around each other, it's very balletic. It's like a ballet. And I think that's on purpose.
It feels like it. It feels like a ballet for sure. And the music definitely underscores all of that with the swelling of the strings and
which I think pushes it into the realm of theatrical, which then makes it more acceptable as a melodramatic visual. You know, you don't feel taken out of it. You don't go, oh, that's a little...
They go like very classic with the soundtrack in that moment. Like they go for like kind of an older era of media. Like they just go for straight romance, like swelling romance scene, you know, at least in terms of score.
Yeah, at this point in time, Louis reminds Daniel that they met in a gay bar, and he makes this metaphor to basically like, imagine the best drugs you've ever taken and multiply it by miles to the rings of Saturn and back. And like, that's what a vampire's kiss feels like. You know?
So question, is that what happened in the novel too? They met at a gay bar?
No, I don't think so.
So that must have been a recontextualization. Maybe
was Daniel Malloy like a junkie at any point in his life in the original?
Not text? In the books.
No,
in the books, yeah.
No,
so it's that's another thing that I think it's almost like if they're going to retcon it this way, it's almost like both characters had things about themselves they didn't want to reveal at the time. You know, but now that Daniel's older, he's more like, yeah, I was there for drugs. I was trying to get high, and you know,
right.
And they're more willing to be honest about what's going on, which I think is interesting because none of those details are incompatible with the original telling. So I think it's really interesting. Other than, you know, the huge departure that he's black, but I guess if you look at it from the novel's point of view, I mean, I don't know if the novel explicitly says Louis gay, like white man, does it? Like, so it's possible there was some sort of.
I mean, it's explicit that he's white for sure.
Oh, it is in the book. They explicitly go Louis DuPont, the white guy.
Yeah, he's white. Yeah. There's no mystery there for sure.
It's not a Harry Potter situation where Hermione could have been black the whole time.
No.
Okay.
No, definitely she was. But you know,
Emma Watson's black.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But
this is a mild tangent, but someone put it in a really funny context. There's that whole thing in the Goblet of Fire where Hermione is trying to advocate for the freedom of house elves from slavery. So imagine if she was black and all the characters were laughing at her for trying to end slavery. Right? So
oh no. Oh no.
Anyway,
so we can fast forward a little bit. There's the day of the wedding.
No, the wedding is important. That's such a great scene. Oh my God.
I like the tap dancing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That is such a great, it's a classic dramatic setup.
That's the flavor of New Orleans that I enjoy the most.
Yes. I was going to say, it was like, it should feel very familiar to you because it's very,
just celebratory
jazz band. Yep. Jazz band, the dancing, the partying. It's very classic New Orleans.
But it's also like a classic dramatic setup of here's a huge celebration. Characters are at an emotional high. Then we juxtapose it with extreme tragedy. Like right afterward.
So there's this like, I mean, there's nothing worse than having a wedding and then a traumatic death. That's like one of the worst.
A suicide. like
yeah, it's one of the worst things I could imagine ever happening to somebody.
Which like it like sort of in character makes sense, but it's so out of nowhere that you're as shocked as the character is, as Louis is, because I don't think neither Louis or the audience is expecting him to commit suicide at that moment, and you're like, oh, what the fuck?
No, it's very.
But it plays because he's had issues his whole life, so
and they're also enjoying this, just after this amazing wedding. There's a tap dancing segment.
A wedding that Paul did not enjoy. Paul did not approve of this wedding. So
he did not approve of it, but he enjoyed that tap dancing, that's for sure.
But he didn't stand up after when they were all applauding for the jumping of the broom. He's the only one who kept sitting. So
he did not. It's clear he's very protective over his sister.
Yeah.
And like you're kind of seeing this all play out, right? But eventually when Louis is turned into a vampire, that he'll never have a wife, he'll never have a family, he'll never be part of this daylight community ever again. And it's kind of like his last hurrah, right? And he kind of says that is also his last sunrise he's ever seen.
And and that's actually one of the few things he's thankful for his vampirism for, because he now hates sunrises and he's glad that it forces him to never be able to see one again.
And there's this absolutely beautiful scene of Paul and Louis. And I love this because it feels so true to like a wedding party, a celebration. It's in the wee hours of the morning. You're cleaning up after the wedding.
Yeah.
And it just feels so true to life, at least my life, like the weddings in my family, they don't stop. We go from sunrise to sunrise the next day. So, and Marvin knows this. So it felt very true to me. It's very familiar to my life. My family parties well into the night till the sun comes up, and especially at weddings. And the scene where they climb up onto the roof and enjoy the sunrise, and it's just absolutely beautiful, and it's heavily color graded, and I love it. And I love it. It's just a beautiful setting, and they're kind of talking, but then you're faced with this really horrible incident where Paul just like up and walks off the roof. You're like, what the fuck? Paul commits suicide. But rewatching this, I actually rewatched the pilot. There is. My sister Selena brought up a good point, and I want to get your opinions on it. Do you believe that maybe Paul was compelled by Lestat, somewhere compelling him to do that? Potentially.
I don't think so.
I don't think the story needs that.
Yeah, and I don't think that is necessary as well. And I also think that doesn't line up with the original events from the novel. And also, I think
this is a departure from that, right?
But then also, I think the way Paul plays it reminds me of because he's content, like he's feeling actually pretty happy in the moment almost.
Paul?
Yeah, like he's actually like content with his brother. He's talking about things with his brother.
Well, he's saying his brother was dancing with this lady named Hazel, and he's like, you should get married to her. You were dancing with her.
Well, he's trying to like give him aspirations for the future, and he's looking at his future hopefully, and he's accepted that he thinks Lily will be taken care of by her new husband, or not Lily, Grace will be taken care of by her new husband and all this. But this is all things people do right before they commit suicide. So one thing that is often misunderstood about people with suicidal ideations is that right before they commit suicide, people who were in a deep depression, like Paul was, tend to suddenly seem like, oh, they're happy again. They've worked things out because they've already decided in their mind, I'm going to commit suicide. Oh, everything's fine. And if you view it from that point of view, this scene looks like Paul wrapping things up, making sure the future will be okay if I'm gone, then being like, okay, everything's fine. Goodbye.
And he's talking about, he says, I think his last words are like, I've had too much checkered cake or something like that.
Yeah. And, I think it's supposed to be him being like, okay, I'm finally just going to go. I
mean, needless to say, it's a very sad scene. I got very emotional because I guess the juxtaposition of this like beautiful, beautiful sunrise and this amazing, amazing wedding juxtaposed with this terrible, graphic, awful suicide
that no one saw coming.
It really tugs at your heartstrings, right? And it just kind of gives in the pilot, it gives you a idea that the troubles and the problems that Louis is going to be going through are just getting started. Right?
Well, to me, what it does is at least in the movie, Louis' like super depression at the beginning.
Yes. It's because of his brother also died.
Right. But it has no context the audience is aware of. It's just more of like we're brought into the world. We see Louis really sad, and then Lestat gives him an out. This makes you realize the depths of his sadness, and you really sympathize with him and you kind of understand, okay, I'm going to give in. Like, I fucking have no other option right now. Like, not only is
he is at his lowest point because he has cut himself off from Lestat on purpose, and Paul was his only confidant otherwise.
Yeah, and Paul is now gone. And not only that, as we'll see soon, his mother's coping mechanism is to blame him for everything.
Yes, his mom the next morning blames Louis for Paul's death.
Yeah, you must have said something to him.
And none of his family will defend him, despite him having been the one who propped up the family with their comfort financially, reputationally, all of that. He is the glue that held the family together after their father's death. He is nothing but a pariah. And no wonder he wants to say, fuck this. I'm going to become a vampire.
Well, you're kind of seeing that Louis, even as a human, is different. He's different. He's treated differently.
Yeah.
He never really like fits in.
Yes.
He's gay in a time where you can't be black and gay in New Orleans. He's got an unsavory job.
He doesn't like what he does.
He lays it all out for the confessional box. Like, he just goes into like a nice long, like itemized list of all the things wrong with his life.
Yeah.
He does. He's been keeping very careful notes of what's been gone. But essentially what happens, what made me think that maybe that Lestat compelled Paul to jump off the roof, because there is this undercurrent of like, Lestat has chosen Louis as his life companion. That is clear. And it's just a matter of making it so, right? So, and then what further made me think of that is during the funeral parade through Storyville, Lestat crashes and
he is like completely irreverent and not sorry, and
he's
like
not sorry
completely
at all.
Disregarding of the tragedy,
He is not sorry at all. He's pretty cold. He's not very sympathetic toward Louis, and it upsets Louis. Louis like, I can't believe he would crash this funeral. It's upsetting. He can't even focus on grieving because all he can think about is stupid Lestat, and all of that. So basically, this brings us to the scene where that awesome church scene, which, wow, what a scene, honestly. I think this church scene is just so well done.
Well, first, the last bit before he ends up in the church is he looks for Lily and finds out that Lily's dead.
Yes. Thanks for reminding me about that, because that's huge, right?
Like the one last confidant that he might have had.
Yes. Lily was clearly someone he admired and cared about, and Lily's been dead for 2 weeks, and she died of that mysterious illness that's been plaguing New Orleans, which we all know what that's code for. That means Lestat has claimed her life. And that is so fucked because Lestat knows what Lily means to Louis. A lot of L names in this show. Lily, Louis, Lestat.
It's like Superman.
Lois Lane, Lana Lang.
Yeah.
Damn.
So I guess that potentially could add some potential evidence to him being compelled, because then you could say that Lestat, having identified Louis' support systems, systematically removed them all.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
But I think that's a bit of a stretch. There's nothing in the text that supports it directly.
I guess that's his MO in the books.
I think I prefer to think that he recognized that Paul was already weak and it was a matter of time. And maybe he had planted a seed of doubt in him during that angry scene in the dinner. That could have been part of it.
That's possible too.
I don't think it was an active compelling. I don't read it that way. I mean, obviously with Lily, that's specifically so that support system is removed for Lestat or for Louis.
I just feel like I just feel like I'm like, God, Lestat had to have something to do with this in some way, shape, or form. It just feels that way.
Well, sometimes life is just tragic, and sometimes,
sure, definitely.
Right. And in terms of melodrama, things can be, dramatic on purpose, just because that's how the story is.
It's possible, almost likely, that Paul probably had suicidal ideations his whole life, and the moment he decides to go through with it is the night after his sister goes through with the wedding that he strongly disapproves of, Yeah,
definitely. And I will say AMC did choose to include at the end of the show a card about seeking help for suicidal thoughts, which I think it's maybe legally mandated, but nonetheless, I think that
I don't know why it caught me off guard when it came up. It's like, oh wait, yeah, totally.
Right, there was one.
That was part of this show.
Yeah, I've actually been like, wait a minute. Oh, right. Yes.
I think
we had one suicide
good.
And one near suicide, or someone who was very, very clearly, spiraling around that drain.
Part of me wanted the card to say, like, are you being compelled by a vampire named? Have you run into a vampire named Lestat? If you have, please seek help at the Catholic Church. Call this number.
Yeah.
So Louis desperately goes to the church where he hopes to confess all of his sins, which Dan already referenced that amazing scene where he already had a list ready to go.
That's the best part of that scene to me. I love
the way it's shot too. This like below angle when we're looking up at, the camera is positioned almost underneath Louis's like chin area, and he's just like rattling off everything that he's
great performance
fucked up on.
Yes,
the performance is amazing. All the performances are amazing in the show.
That's honestly the other thing. So see, I was gonna say the thing that like drew me in is that there's the metafiction aspect, which is narratively fascinating to me, but then what keeps you compelled is the really strong character work and acting.
Not Lestat. Lestat doesn't keep you compelled. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean,
just kidding.
But it's like there is not a bad performance in the whole show.
Not a single
really,
one.
It's just so funny because again, I look back to Black Sails, and we're on the last season of Black Sails right now, and in my mind, it's like, oh, everyone's just phoning it in. Like they're just like, we're gonna end the show.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a different level of acting than Black Sails.
This would be, in my mind, like Oscar caliber acting. Like they're very good. Yeah, everyone's very good.
Very good. Yeah. And this scene really displays that on full.
Yeah. And I'm a performance / character development guy. So that's what really hooks me into shows like this, where I'm like, you do it so well, I'm gonna keep watching. Like I love watching characters develop. I love watching actors embody a performance so completely. Yeah, mm-hmm. I mean, like it's to the point where, even from a technical acting perspective, we were like shocked when we looked it up and we're like, oh, he's British and he's Australian? The hell? Like that did not register at all in our minds. Like we were completely enamored with the idea that, that's just a French guy they got or some.
No, yeah. And like extra props to Jacob's acting for having two distinct accents across eras.
Yes.
Yeah, the older accent and the New Orleans accent. It's so interesting. I love that.
It's tough.
They decided to make that decision.
No, and that is a very realistic thing to include there. Like,
it is
to update his dialect as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I really
especially
love that.
Given who he's hanging around with, which we'll later figure out. That person he's hanging around with will have affected his dialogue. Yeah,
we will figure that all out later. But not only are the performances A++, but this scene has some really, really great moments of dialogue, especially this speech from Lestat where he talks about the sorrows of racism that Louis feels, and just he touches on the grief, the troubles. Lestat is like a fucking master manipulator. Like he knows how to fucking.
Well, part of it is that you completely agree with him. All these are points you agree with, but then you also know that he's objectively trying to manipulate this guy at the same time.
Yes,
so
he's trying to manipulate him. It's not a friendly exchange, and he's basically forcing him. And this is the scene in which he is turned into a vampire, which is basically you get bitten, you drink, and then you have to feed from the vampire, which he is feeding from his wrist, from
I have a
Lestat's
question.
wrist.
So earlier when he bit him and he took the small drink, a little drink, he gave him a bit of blood from his fingernail afterward. So that wouldn't turn him into a vampire.
No.
He needs to drink like a bunch of blood? Is that how it works? Okay.
Yes.
Then why did he do that? Does that like help him heal? Is that why he did that?
Yeah, it's like a little taste, a little feel. It's part of the drug related.
Because there is some vampire lore, where you can drink other vampires' blood to heal. Like it's like a healing potion almost, literally. So I wondered if that was similar, where he's
could be where they're going.
I almost killed you. Here's some of my blood so you won't die, like type of thing.
That definitely could be part of it. But in order to become a good through and through vampire, you need to drink.
Yeah, he drinks for a while.
Yes, you need to drink.
He seems to almost drain Lestat. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think why so many people felt a connection is just like Louis is an outsider. He's a black man in the Jim Crow South. Being a vampire and becoming a vampire feels like a good option, like a good fit at this moment, even though he doesn't want it. But it feels like, I don't know, you're kind of like, well,
I mean, the biggest temptation he gives with him is that like, you're feeling so much guilt. This will release all of your guilt.
Yes.
How does that feel? What do you think about that? You know, like, and that's really what compels him, is that like, it's such a great departure, I think, from the movie, where the movie is, I am sad, I would like to not feel sad, become a vampire. This is like, no, I am like dying of guilt. I'm about to die from how much guilt I'm feeling. And this is essentially a drug that is going to release me from that guilt. It's like a story of addiction, you know?
Yeah. And Louis quite literally says, for the first time in my life, I was seen by
That's
Lestat.
Also, yeah.
He accepts him for who he is, for a Black man who's gay, who has the career that he has. So it's this like, God, it's so manipulative. It's like, it's like you love Lestat for like, I feel so conflicted inside because I'm just like, you know, Lestat loves him, and he does say to him, I love you. I give you love. I send you love. You give the love back to me. You know, we're in love. We're in love. I love you for who you are, a Black man, a gay man. You know, I love everything about you. But at the same time, it's like, I want to control you and manipulate you, and you're going to live by my side, and I'm going to literally make you my vampire companion. So you're just kind of like, what the fuck, you know? Like,
and it's interesting because even in the modern context of him retelling it in 2022, he still describes it as, it was the first time I felt seen, as in like, he thinks it's true. Lestat is his abuser, but he's still giving his abuser the benefit of the doubt of, no, he did see me. And I think that's interesting.
You can also like litigate that a little bit to say it's the first time he felt seen.
That's also true. Yeah.
Yes. And like, but like, to me, that's what makes this show so strong, is you have these characters and these dialogues that are just so complex, and they make you think, and you're like, oh God, no way. Do I like Lestat? Do I hate Lestat? Do I think he's a manipulative bitch? Do I think he's the perfect partner? Like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about him. And he's so complex, and there's depth there. And there's, you know, there's just so much. The same goes for Louis. For the struggles that he's going through. I think so many people can relate to, not only on just like a historical level where like this actually did happen, Jim Crow and racism, this is still something we feel to this day. And you know, people relate to this type of grief and depression, and maybe is there a way to escape all that and not have to deal with that? And maybe becoming a vampire is the answer.
Well, I think this show is going to eventually tell you, don't do that, please. Like, that's probably.
Well, I think this show, I think we all know the answer to the question. While you may become a vampire, it's not going to erase your problems.
You're right.
You know? Like, it might just amplify them, actually. And
it'll
also
just turn
like,
them into vampire problems.
Yeah, vampire problems. And then also like, there's the question of like, who wants
vampires, no problems.
More vampires, more problems. Yeah, exactly, Dan.
That's actually literally a problem.
But yeah.
And like, who wants to live forever, right? Like, I think Louis touches on that. And it's just like, you know,
he said the vampire is
what
bored.
Idiot is still wanting eternral life these days? Like, what idiot?
Oh, no.
Absolute
that actually sounds like hell.
Oh, that is still the one of the strongest desires of so many people.
Oh no, for what? I feel like the opposite. I'm like, please God, don't let me live forever. Please, whatever you do, end this, end this when it needs to be ended.
I think it would be scary. Like, I had this once thought of like, okay, living forever sounds probably like a terrible idea, because then you will live to see like if you're literally immortal, like you cannot die, right? Like you are like Mr. Immortal and you are incapable of death. Imagine all the horrible shit you're going to experience. The sun is going to explode. You will then eventually be trapped either in the gravitational pull of a white dwarf or a black hole. And you're just it's just gonna suck.
In between, thousands upon thousands of years of floating.
Yeah. So while dying, lack of breath and space. So
you're gonna be very, very far away from anything as soon as you're not on Earth.
So that all sounds like shit. So, but
So that's kind of where this pilot ends. And
we forgot one quick little detail. He tries to kill Lestat.
He does.
Oh, yeah.
He does try. I mean, he tries to like stab it, stab the fucking monster, and that's not going to do anything. So
and then Lestat just starts preaching to him. And I think that a fun little detail also is that like they show his face is soaked in blood, like the bottom half of his face just soaked in blood. But as the scene goes on, the blood starts disappearing more and more. And I think it's sort of like this idea that he's magical. He just absorbs blood. It just slowly just goes away, and it explains why they don't have problems with like blood being everywhere and stuff. And I thought
that's something that is maintained throughout the show.
I think so. Not like they don't like show like an animation of it going in or something, but you notice every time they cut back and forth between them, there's a little less blood each time.
Yeah, it's just little details like that, and that I think make this show really well done. And there's also the fact that like I love the randomness of like the priests coming in, and they're like, "Oh, what did I walk in on here?" And the man like slips on the blood, and it's like this like little bumbly,
there's a bit of slapstick on that,
a little comedic moment. And there's this like frozen in time where this priest is trying to run away.
I mean, that entire sequence is slapstick. That's like a Looney Tunes sequence.
Yeah,
it is, but it works. It didn't take me out of it. I just thought it worked really well, right? So he does, he comically pulls the priest out of the confession box, kind of flies away, and it's very graphic. And then another priest comes in and he's like, oh shit, and slips on blood and all that. It's a little comical, but it shows the true power of Lestat and how he's not really fazed by anybody walking in on him covered in blood, doing these horrific things, because what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to arrest me? You going to try to kill me? I mean, what are you going to do? You can't do anything. There's nothing you can do to a vampire.
And he's an especially old vampire, so he's got a lot of strength.
He's got a lot of experience. So now that we've recapped the episode, I would love to know your closing thoughts, each of you's closing thoughts, and a little bit about how you felt, and answer the question, of course, would you stay tuned? We can start with Dan.
Structured.
Let's start with Dan.
Yes, let us start with me.
The person who hasn't. Again, we'll recap. Dan is the person.
Yeah, I'm the only one who can actually answer this question, to be honest.
Right.
Well, I've spoiled it, already, but I can give more context after you, Dan.
I'll be honest, like my gut reaction to seeing the previews of what was coming kind of made me scared to continue.
Oh, interesting. What in particular?
I think it just might be I am afraid of watching a parade of misery for this guy. Like I'll be like, I don't know if I currently am in a place in my life where I want to just actively watch someone's life unraveling.
So I wouldn't say that's what happens. I think it's more of like new life, different issues. That's is sort of like.
And the other thing that like I tend to check out with, just in general, is when things get generically vampire-y. And that is what the previews were showing me, because it was like more fang shots, more hissing, more like, vampire action, because it's a sizzle reel. But because that's what they put together all in they condensed it all. I was like, God, I hope it's not like that.
No, it's not like an action show with vampire action a lot. The vampire action happens every once in a while, but it's really more about like, okay, now how do we socially navigate around the fact that, we're two vampires. We're kind of openly gay. How are we going to then, are you going to continue your business? How does your family think about this? It's more social and mechanical in terms of understanding what their new life is like, more than it is like, now that you're a vampire, let's go eat a bunch of humans. It's not really like that.
No, it's not. It's definitely not like that.
Although they do talk about the mechanics of, okay, how do we eat humans? So we're going to have to systematically figure out a way to do it where we don't draw attention to ourselves. It becomes logistical.
I'm more sold on this.
I mean, there is logistics. It is logistical for sure, and also you're shown the life of someone who is new to this life, right? New to being a vampire, and what comes with that. I mean, with becoming a vampire brings vampire problems, And
the second episode is kind of funny because it's like him logistically going through a lot of it, and like, okay, so I sleep in a coffin. Let me explain why. It blocks out all the sun. so it's safer,
Does it just turn into What We Do in the Shadows?
A little bit, but like completely straight, because he does, because they do have to explain why we're doing things the way we're doing them. And because he's like, I can start to hear people. It's like, yeah, that's a gift. That'll get better,
Yeah, it's kind of fun because the next episode does kind of cover a little bit of a spoiler. It kind of goes into the logistics of, and also when you become a vampire, your body dies, and it's a very gruesome process, a very traumatic experience. So you go into that, you adjusting. It's a little more logistical, but not in like a very like a grim, theatrical, cheesy way. In my opinion,
it's not about like wallowing in depression. It's more about like, we have like a new set of problems now. How do we manage this?
All right. Yeah. Well, I can say that like one of the thread lines that I am like interested in still, like after episode 1, like what I want to know more about is Daniel Malloy. I want to know his deal.
So that's something I was going to say. That's actually my favorite part of the show.
Okay.
My favorite part of the show is whenever they cut back to present day. I think part of it is because in the original movie, the interviewing framework
it's just a bookend.
It's just a flashback narrative to show off what happened. And then the meaty part's all in the past.
Yes, the interview is just a
framing mechanism.
It's a framing mechanism.
But whereas in this show, it is explicitly an important part of the show narratively. And Daniel Malloy is now an interesting character.
Okay, yeah, then that helps sell me because I want way more of Malloy.
And you have an interesting juxtaposition of Louis younger and Louis now older, rich guy living in the UAE. What has life done for him? Why is he so different now versus back then?
Okay.
And that's the parts I enjoyed. You start getting way more scenes of them in present day, which
all right.
I find to be the most interesting parts of the show, actually, because this is now a vampire, Louis, who has been a vampire for like 200 something years. And he's like, I
will say that this is probably the first time in this podcast history where hosts have convinced the other host to continue.
Oh my gosh. At least to maybe episode 2.
But I would say that's a success. I like, you have gotten me more excited to continue. It's like, this was one of those shows where I could take or leave continuing it, like as of where I was at the end of episode 1. But you have just like clued me into things that I want to see. So,
and I will say there is, like you saw, there's literally glimpses of vampire violence, but there's one specific horrific act of vampire violence that is like metaphorical, and it's like really important as a character moment. So none of it's like just for the sake of vampire violence or gore or just to have vampire action.
It's not like I was insinuating that is what it would immediately devolve into or anything like that. It's just that like that is what they chose to show me next.
Right. They're trying to entice people,
fill me with confidence.
It's a sizzle reel.
They're trying to do, they're like, people want the vampire things, the blood, the fangs, the sex, the drinking, the drug, like they're trying to.
And I am willing to believe that they would ramp up sex. As like an element of the show. So like, and if that were to continuously ramp up as like a major component of the show, I think I would lose some interest myself personally.
I would say it's a component, but it's not like overly like.
Yeah, like if it just remains about as much of the show as it has been so far, then
definitely.
We're fine.
Definitely. Yeah, it's not overly. Yeah.
It's kind of like a mechanism rather than let's show a sex scene. Like the sex scenes have narrative value and make sense. Good. And if there are portions where it's just to show, because there's going to be portions that show like, we continued to have sex, this way. It's like as part of montage. So like you see a glimpse of them like, going into the same coffin together or whatever. And it's almost like a cute moment.
And but we also, vampires
I love that scene in all the movies have it. We continue to have sex.
Vampires don't need or desire to have sex as the drinking blood is
That's their sex.
That is their sex, yes.
Right,
exactly.
right.
So I guess when you see that, is there a lot of blood drinking? Yeah, there is. But
that's what there will definitely be a lot of, though. Yeah, there will be a lot of blood drinking.
But that is their sex. That is the equivalent to sex for a vampire.
Okay.
So all right, we gotta, in the moment, would possibly, I guess, think stay tuned for the next episode. Obviously,
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, and I did stay tuned for season 1, and I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was the best show released that year. I'm a bit behind, and I have to watch season 2, but I hear that season 2 is even better than season 1.
Yeah, people who were okay with season 1 said season 2 is amazing. So
I am super, super excited. I thoroughly expect to enjoy season 2 if it's anything like season 1. I'm very excited. I'm going to continue watching it. So I'm super excited. I'm very happy with this franchise and the creative liberties that they've taken as an Anne Rice fan. I think it's interesting to see her legacy live on in this way and to have so many people enjoy it. And it came from her mind and her experiences in life. And she's no longer with us anymore, but it still lives on. So I think that's super powerful. And I'd like to think that she would be happy, hopefully happy with the reception and the direction of the show, despite whatever weirdness is going on, which we might not ever know. But
I unfortunately I have a more sobering perspective in that, given what I've read about Anne Rice and the way she interpreted or disagreed with reinterpretations of her work or fan interpretations of her work, even like fan art of her work, I just don't think she would have thought of it that way. I think she would have probably thought this was almost heresy, the way it was rewritten. And I think she would have thought, I think it's just the type of thing where it's, I think it's just, I think it's an unhealthy amount of protection over art. I'm of the mind that once art is out in the world, it's no longer yours. And the idea that someone wants to keep trying to protect it and trying to say, no, it must only be this way, I think that's antithetical to art, actually, because art only makes sense when it's interpreted by other people. And if you want to stifle other people's interpretations of your art and the remixing of your art that much, I don't know. I really don't like that point of view. I actually find it really, really hostile and toxic, and I've never agreed with it. I think it's part of that. That's part of the reason why I've never been an Anne Rice fan. I don't like that point of view at all. I think it's...
Well, you're talking about, I mean, you're saying that having never read an Anne Rice novel.
But I know of her perceptions, which makes me not...
But I think, she's dead now.
I mean, you're allowed to not be into someone for any old reason, but...
Yeah, of course. But I feel like she died. She passed away while this show was in production. So we have the opinions of her son, but we don't have a lot of visibility into what exactly she thought, because she passed away and we don't know. But the truth of the matter is she did sell the rights to her properties to AMC. So there's got to be some amount of... I mean, it probably was money, to be honest. But
money gets a lot of wheels rolling.
I'm sure, but there's,
grease those
there's
palms.
got to be some amount of willingness to let it go, because she did in the end sell the rights.
Yeah,
they are operating in legal. They are operating in legal territory. I think where the protective nature comes in is when you think about, this is a reflection of who she is and her art and her feelings, and around a very traumatic event in her life. And, I don't pretend to know how that feels. I don't have a child to lose, so I don't know. But that being said, I think it's fair to definitely not be a fan of the artist and the way they want their work in the world and feeling protective over it and not agree with them. But I would love to know your feelings if you read an Anne Rice novel on her actual writing as an author.
I mean, for me, the line was crossed when she was actively suing people for making fan fiction.
Well, I don't really like fan fiction, so I think I think it's weird.
No, I think, I think
it's okay to not like it, but are you willing to sue people over like writing it? Like, are you willing to sue people because they make it?
I mean, there's questions. Are they making money off of it?
No, no one's making any money off of this.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it depends, because again, the art is it's almost like you can't remove yourself from your art. So I don't know. Maybe I would feel hella protective. I might. I might, especially if it was about a family member that I lost. I might feel hella protective over that. And I don't want people writing alternate things about it. I might.
Okay, I can offer some perspective. So like I've written and directed a movie that was based on characters that are very personal to me. But if someone decided to make a fan narrative about these characters and did something with them, I would not want to sue them.
But that's you. I mean,
but I think it's literally amoral to do that.
I
think it's against the point of art, because you're having people who are excited about your art and want to express that in a certain way that isn't violating your copyright, that isn't treading on your already enormous amount of money you've made off of these properties. By the way, copyright lasts too long anyway. So I'm of the type of person that it should have stayed at the statute of being 25 years or whatever it was back in the day, instead of the absurd 100 and something days it is now, or years it is now. So I just antithically am completely against that point of view. I just don't think it is moral for her to have had such a hostile stance towards this group of fans that way. And I think it speaks more to like this type of, I don't know what it is.
I mean, does that make you like a bad person? I don't know if it does, but
I think in relation to your,
I don't know. I'm on the fence. I don't have an answer for you. I'm not completely convinced of your point of view.
I just think in you're not a bad person, but I think in terms of your relationship to the art you have created, it's unhealthy and it's toxic.
Yeah, I don't think it makes you a bad person. I don't think it makes you like a morally corrupt person. I think it's a position, it's a stance on your art.
But then in turn, it makes it difficult for me to enjoy her work naturally. And actually, that's part of why I enjoyed the show, because the show is kind of saying, actually, there's parts of your book we've improved. Honestly.
Oh no.
So I actually
God, no. I don't believe that at all. It's different. It's both are amazing. The book is amazing. The show wouldn't exist without the amazing source material. So
I think the show, making the direct comparison to the movie and the movie I have seen, it's definitely an upgrade to the movie.
I don't argue with you about that at all. I definitely think the show is better than the movie, 100%. But the book is also very, very good. Of course, better than the movie. The movie is arguably the worst property out of this, to be honest.
Which I believe she didn't like either, right? When she was alive, I believe.
She was involved, but I think she said
she was unsatisfied with how it came out.
You know?
Yeah.
But again, I will never know. I'm not an author in that sense. I didn't write this incredibly successful series that was so near and dear to my heart. I mean, I think it's a perspective. I don't necessarily cross her off my list because of her perspective on fan fiction, but I say I'm a fan because of the actual material. Like I've been a lifelong Anne Rice reader. I'm an actual fan of the written work. Mm-hmm. And I still maintain to be a fan. I still read Anne Rice books to this day. So
yeah, and I've always come from the perspective of like, I am anti-death of the author. Like, I don't believe that you can separate.
I don't either, but I actually don't disagree with her stance. Like I don't disagree with it. I don't know if I would do it personally. If I was Anne Rice and lived this life, if I would go down that path, I don't disagree with her decision to do it, to pursue it. I don't.
Okay.
And that's just my point of view. I don't agree with it if it's Anne Rice, if it's I think there's a couple other famous authors that are also of the same mind. And there's a couple famous authors on the opposite end of the spectrum that are like, oh, we love fan fiction. So I don't disagree with any of those authors if I've read their material or not. Like, I don't disagree with that. That's just my personal opinion. So, yeah.
I'll give my opinion. Don't file frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah. That's part of that's for me. That's where the line was crossed.
But you say frivolous. I don't know. Like, it's frivolous in your point of view, though. Like, that's not frivolous.
Why go after actively harming others' lives for something you can ignore?
Then why do copyright laws exist?
Well, I don't think copyright law should exist for as long as they do. 2, there's fair use. And most of these fell under the purview of fair use. It's just she was using her money to be able to bully these people out because they couldn't fight back. So they were essentially bullied to taking their fan fiction underground. These fan fiction sites still exist. They just require passwords and handshake memberships to get in. You know,
I don't disagree with. I mean, again, that's your approach to art. Some other people's approach to art are just not that way, and I don't.
If Disney, as a studio, decided to sue a bunch of people making fan fiction about Iron Man, you think they're in their rights?
I do. I don't think that that's. I don't disagree with it. I don't know. I don't disagree with it. I just don't. I don't know how else to like tell you that I don't disagree with that action. It's their IP. It's their.
Okay. I think we can put this to bed. Or I mean, I think I've gotten to the point where we're not going to, we've kind of settled into the camps here. So
yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a good conversation, and I'm glad we had it because I like that we don't necessarily agree on the aspect of fan fiction, and I want to end on that's okay. Like people can disagree, and that's what makes issues interesting. Like we're different people, we come from different experiences. No one's right, no one's wrong, and that's like the beauty of this all. And we kind of disagree on this. Would you stay tuned? Like Marvin and I stayed tuned, and Dan is on the fence a little bit. So I guess that's our episode on Interview with the Vampire and the pilot episode of season 1.
For what it's worth, it is a very, very good pilot.
Yeah. I mean, they
it's
clearly
an extremely good first episode of something.
Yeah, they went out of their way to make sure that it's compelling, not just to a person who is introduced to this world the first time, but it has that hook for people who know what the original source material was. It makes you go, oh shit, that's crazy. They're doing that. So
I love the title of this episode. It's In the Throes of Increasing Wonder.
Yeah, all the episode titles are based on something really
everything is going to be a dialogue like title drop, right?
Yeah. It's all going to be title drops. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So overall, I think we all agree for sure that it is a really well done pilot. And let us know what you think. Write us at the email address contact@wouldyoustaytuned.com.
Yeah, we technically have that set up. Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Leave us a review. This is an incredibly long episode, but we knew it would be because it's something I definitely feel strongly about. It's a property that I feel strongly about. It was very formative for me. So yeah, I have a lot of feelings about it, and I'm glad I could experience this with somebody who hasn't seen it before. Dan. So stay tuned.
Well, you didn't really. You weren't there watching it with me.
No, but like that I meant experience it as we could have this discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, happy Halloween. We're watching it in October because it's Halloween. Forgot to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it isn't quite Halloween yet.
Right. But it's coming. Yay.
It is coming. And what better season than Halloween to watch the show? So please catch us on our other podcast, Newbie Star Trek. Stay tuned to this podcast if you like it, and leave us a review again. Check us out. We have a couple other episodes on Pluto, the anime series on Netflix.
I thought you were saying we were on Pluto TV.
Not Pluto. I know. I felt like it could have been interpreted that way, which is why I said we did an episode on Pluto, the animated series on Netflix. We've done Breaking Bad. We've done Jury Duty. We've done Sopranos. Our
intention is to continue doing this series a little more often. I know we had let it languish for a little bit after the first few episodes that we had done, and next time it's actually my choice. And Sarah won't be here for that one. She's going to go on a little trip, actually to New Orleans, which is funny. So, but I think a good one for Dan, Ricardo, and I to do would be The Penguin. Because Dan has an interest in Batman, and I have an interest in Sopranos, and Ricardo insists this is a great show. So,
well, you said it's Batman Sopranos.
So let's see if it'll be interesting because technically I'll be hosting, but he'll be the advocate because I haven't seen the show at all. So we'll see. Yeah. And the show's not done yet, actually. But even by the time we record, it wouldn't have all been out yet. So
yeah, and in all honesty, that's probably the best case scenario for this podcast.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see if we'll stay tuned with that one. I don't know because I haven't seen it, and I gotta be honest. A lot of the aesthetic, personally, does not jive with me. So maybe I'll have my mind changed. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah. We'll see you guys.
Thanks for listening. Yeah. We'll catch you guys later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care, y'all.